Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Today we have a very interesting talk on owls being delivered by Dr. Prachi Mehta. Dr. Prachi Mehta studied wildlife biology at the Wildlife Institute of India in Dehradun. For her PhD, she examined the impact of forestry practices on bird communities in the Satpura Hills in central India. After her PhD, she joined the Wildlife Research and Conservation Society as a scientist and has been studying various aspects of mammals and bird ecology. Since 2005, Prachi and her team have been working on the ecology of the forest owlet and other owls. Apart from owls, Prachi has been working on human-elephant conflict migration in Karnataka. Being in the forest, bird watching, and photography are what Prachi always looks forward to. So without any further delay, I hand it over to Prachi to go ahead with this talk. Prachi, you're on mute. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, hello and a very good afternoon to everyone on a very lazy Sunday afternoon. Thank you for joining in. I hope I'm audible. Is it clear?
Yes, Prachi, you're clear.
All right, okay. So at the outset, I would like to thank Nikhil, Deva sir and Delibird for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk on this very interesting platform. I've been seeing, the lockdown series talks. I've attended also a few of them where I could, and it was very informative and very interesting. So I hope I can keep up the lead of continuing with that line of work. So my talk today is about all things wise and wonderful. Now, I really think that owls are beautiful and wonderful, and I'm sure all of you also think the same. And during my talk today, I'll talk about various aspects of our conservation research and the threats that they are facing. And let's see how we develop this further. So my today's talk I have put into 4 sections. I'll start with an overview of owl species. Then we'll go over to adaptations in owls. And then what are the challenges faced by owls? And lastly, I'd like to touch upon role of research and management for conservation of owls in India. So this is the world owl distribution map. And as you can see, they are found everywhere. They are found everywhere except Antarctica. Now, can you guess why? I mean, you can just write it in your chat box. Why owls or any other predators are not found in Antarctica? Okay. So, yeah. I'll come to owl taxonomy now here, and I'd like to talk about how this is actually the owls. There are 2 main clans. As you can see, there are 2 clades: Afroapes and Australoapes. As you can see down below, yeah, Australoapes and Afroapes. So owls belong to Afroapes, and as you can see, there are 3 main families in that: Accipitridae, Pandionidae, and Cacaridae. So Accipitridae are, as you know, you've already been very familiar with, talks by Chris Bowden and Rajneesh and Mike Prince, who have talked about various kind of raptors. So there are eagles and bustards and harriers in Accipitridae. In Pandionidae, there is ospreys. And in Cacaridae, these are condors and New World vultures. Now, as you can see, the owls belongs to the family called Strigiformes, and they have evolved long back. It is estimated to be 70 million years ago. So they are quite an old lineage to come from, and they are quite sitting very further from falconiforms, which you can see are a part of austral apes. I'll talk about these points as we go ahead. Next. So I'll talk about phylogenetic relationship of owls. As you can see, this is the tree of evolution in which the branches, so all of the owls have evolved from dinosaurs, and they are very closely related to crocodiles. I mean, reptiles. This is what the phylogenetic tree shows. And if you turn any of the branches, you can interchange the branches, but the relationship will remain the same. So this is a very interesting research which is going on in Yale University, and I thought I should share with you here. So systematic of owls. Now, in 1738, Linnaeus put owls closest to vultures and eagles and falcons. So that continued for at least almost a century till from 1884, they were thought to be closest to nightjars, that is Capri multiplicate, because they are nocturnal. And all other birds in the what Linnaeus earlier classified, they are diurnal. And this is all based on DNA sequencing and mitochondrial DNA, and which is the one which fits the closest to the DNA sequencing. Now in 2006, as latest as 2006, I think 14 years ago, with the DNA classification, now they are put closest to, again, ospreys, parrot family, and rollers. So which is quite an unusual, combination, but this is how they are at the systematics of owl is stand there. So this particular picture, as you can see the bird lineage, this is the tree, and there are various branches. And you can see the owl is here, this is the owl, and it is closest. So this is the, again, you can see it is closest to vultures and ospreys, as you can see here. Sorry, ospreys and eagles. So this just shows you that way, that how they are placed within the clade of a tree. So owls, they come in all size and shapes and colors, right? So this particular picture shows you that, right from the smallest to the largest, there are a variety of owl species which are found in India. So extra small to small, medium, large, and XL based on their dimensions. And of course, you can see the colors also. So this is just a picture representation of the owl types which are found. So let's talk about owls of the world. So there are totally 225 species of owls in the world. There are true owls and there are Tyto owls. Right? So the true owls are the ones which are arboreal owls, which they live in trees and they occupy dense forests, and they have different colors. And the Tyto owls, they are open habitat owls, and they have heart-shaped faces, and they are normally white on the belly, and they live in barns and open areas and grasslands. So in the world, there are about 208 species of true owls and about 17 species of Tyto owls. So here is a picture of the smallest owl in the world. This is the elf owl. You can see it's very handy. It just comes in your palm, about 12 centimeter to 14 centimeter. It is found in Arizona. And then the great gray owl, which is about 84 centimeters, and it is found in North America. It is a huge owl.
Hi Prachi, sorry to interrupt you. We're getting a little bit of echo in your in your audio. Do you have any other device that's on? If you could just mute that, I think that will help improve the audio quality. Thank you.
Okay, I have a fan which is. I'll just.
No, the fan's fine. I think. Do you have the talk going on in parallel on another device?
No. Okay, we just put it up. Yeah. Somebody's watching it. Yes.
Yeah, so you can just mute that because that's what's creating the echo. Thank you.
All right. So I'll come to now owls of India. So we have 34 species currently, which is about 15% of world owl population. There are 4 Tyto species and there are 30 true owl species. Now I want to ask, are there any migrant owl species in India? Anybody? You can just write it in your your chat box. So yeah, I'll give the answer. There are 4 species of owls which are migrants: long-eared, short-eared, Pallids scops and Eurasian scops. So these are the migrants, and the rest, all of them are found resident in the country. The smallest owl in India is the pygmy owlet, which is called pygmy owlet, 15 centimeter, and it's found in Northeast India and Himalaya. It's got a very interesting call. So one of our colleague Shankar Raman when he was studying in Meghalaya for the birds. So he had developed a small flute. Dr. Johnson would know about it, and then it would just mimic the call of the collared pygmy owlet, toot, 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 and all the birds would come mobbing it. All kind of hyenas and tits, and this whenever you do that, you have get to see all kind of picture, all kind of birds to take photographs because all the birds get very agitated to hear collared pygmy owlet call. It's a small owl, but it's very powerful. And the biggest owl in India, in the peninsular India, is the Indian eagle owl. So the Eurasian owl is towards the Himalayas. This is in the peninsular India, up to 66 centimeter and 1.2 kg. So now, very interesting that I talked about, owls are placed far away from the falcons. Or overall, they are, see, both owls and all the other birds of prey, they belong to raptor. They are classified as raptors, right? But owls there are certain differences between owls and the other birds of prey. So I have taken falcon as one of the examples to just explain to you. So the falcon is a diurnal, most of the birds of prey would be diurnal. And owls are mostly nocturnal or crepuscular. So crepuscular is mostly they're active during early morning or late night. And there are diurnal owls also, a few of them in India. Then the falcons, they have long and pointed wings, whereas the owls, they have broad and rounded wings. Falcons at high speed. So everybody knows peregrine falcon, they would just come rushing at a speed, whereas owls have slower speed than falcons. Now this is again used to the advantage, which I'll talk about later. So falcons have speed, owls have stealth. Falcons, when they fly, there is a sound, which is a flapping flight. So there is a sound of the flight, whereas the owls have a very silent flight, which is very interesting. In the digestive system, all the other birds of prey, they have a crop which is present, and owls do not have a crop. I'll come to that in the next slide. Ceca also one of the other appendage in the digestive system is vestigial. It's rudimentary. It's barely there for the diurnal owls. Birds, predatory birds. Whereas for the owls, it is quite well developed. The falcon stomach have low pH, whereas the owls have a higher pH in their stomach. All the other birds of prey, they build their own nest. Whereas owls do not build their own nest. They occupy other birds of prey's nest by themselves. I was talking about the digestion, differences in digestion. Now, why all this is important is we'll come to it when, as I progress with the talk. As you can see, on the left side is the digestive tract of a falcon. On the right side, it is of an owl. There is a figure here, as you can see, a bulge, which is called the influence or the crop. So the crop is very well formed in the falcons, whereas it is virtually absent in owls. Now, what is the function of the crop? The crop stores the food. As the bird ingests the prey, it gets stored and slowly it gets digested. Even though the birds of prey, they have very fast digestive system, just like carnivores, very efficient. Whereas herbivores have a very long process of digestion. Mammals or birds of prey, or carnivores rather, they have very efficient processing of food. So here the food does not get stored for the owls. It goes straight in the stomach. Here it gets, little bit of, it gets stored and it gets ground also in other birds of prey. And the food as it progresses down here, you can see here the ceca. There are these two appendages, which is there in just near the lower intestine, the small intestine. And for the falcons or the other birds of prey, it's very rudimentary. Here it's very well developed. So the function of the cecae is to retain water and nitrogen. And there are cecal droppings, not fecal. Cecal droppings, C-A-E-C-A-L droppings for the owls, which are dark brownish in color. Whereas for the falcons, they do not have cecal droppings. So these are some of the differences which comes out in the digestive system. So owls have already shown, couple of adaptations. Now, because of this, now they have taken to a night life. The owls have decided that, just because, they are all part of the same birds of prey family, and there are too many of them during the day active. So the owls have taken to the night life. Now, what are the adaptations for a night life? How does an owl survive, and what does it require for a night life? So first of all, it has to have a very powerful and silent flight. It has to have very powerful vision, equally hearing. And in the night, they have to have, the owls have to have mate selection, pairing, bonding, mating. So in night, he has to find a mate and pair with it. And during the daytime, owls have to really protect themselves from the diurnal raptors. So all this together, owls have actually adapted in such a way that they've become one of the apex nocturnal predators, and they have carved out a niche for themselves. So let's talk about the owl flight. So just imagine that I talked about the falcon earlier. The falcon has a huge, I think 150 kilometers an hour, and it just gushes, and once it sees a prey, it just goes and it picks the prey. So even if the flight is it has got a lot of flapping sound, it doesn't matter, because by the speed, by the time it reaches, the prey has no other choice but to just surrender and succumb, right? So because in the daytime, even if it makes so much of a noise, a falcon can make a very successful kill. But in the night, the dark of the night, where everything is quiet, the owl has no choice but to take its prey by surprise. And for that, it has to have a very silent flight. And the silent flight is possible in owls because it has the feather structure is very different in owls compared to any other birds of prey. So here, if you can see in the figure, there are velvety feathers which are found on the wings, and the legs, which absorb the sound wave, which is not the case in the other birds of prey, because they have very stiff, rigid feathers. So when the sound wave passes through it, it makes a turbulence, and it creates a turbulence which makes a sound. So when the sound wave, the air wave passes through the owl wing, the feathers move like sheets, like a blanket sheets, and the sound gets subdued. Secondly, if you see here, it's got serrated comb-like structures, the owl feathers. So this also helps in subduing the sound of the air wave which is passing through that. And that is how the owls can fly very silently. This is the most simplistic explanation I am giving you. There is far more research done on this, but for this duration, I'm just giving a very simple explanation. So scientists have been using this owl-inspired wing designs to reduce wind turbine noises. There's a lot of research which is going on how to make silent flights, jet flights. So they have developed serrated comb-like structures for the wings. So that it's still going on, and I think very soon maybe we may have reduced jet flights, and at least reduced wind turbine noise, which will really help, because the noise of the wind turbine impacts a lot of wildlife in that area. So that is a very welcome research. Second point, owls which are working, they are active during the night or the day, they have to have a very powerful vision. Now, how are they achieving this? So owls have, as you can see, they're forward-facing eyes. You can see their forward-facing eyes. Other birds of prey also have forward-facing eyes, but owls' eyes are very large. They are like 3% of their body weight. And if you compare it to our eyes, that is human eyes, our human eyes, it is 0.003% of our body. So you can imagine that owl eyes are huge, and they are not actually eyeballs. These are tubes called sclerotoid tubes. They are fixed in their eye socket. So owls cannot move their eyeballs the way we do. So they, for that reason, they have to move their entire head. So that is what owls are very famous for. Even a lot of other birds of prey do that. They can move their entire head. But in owls, the front-facing eyes give them a greater advantage for binocular vision. So here you can see there are three images. This is of a sparrow, this is a woodcock, and this is the owl. So the binocular vision is this dark orange color. Monocular vision is through light yellow vision, and this is the depth of field. So owls have a greater advantage in having this depth of field compared to other birds. They have lateral eyes, so they have limited binocular and monocular vision. But they require this because during the daytime, they are there. They need to keep an eye on the other predators, other birds of prey, which may be active during the daytime. For the owls, there are no other predators active during the night, and they just need to focus on the food that they are looking out for. So that is how owls have a very powerful vision. Also, owls' eyes are packed with huge number of rod cells, which are useful for seeing it in the dim light. They are tightly packed, and that is how owls can see very well in very poor lit conditions also. They do not have many corn cells because they are used for color visions. So that is fine because that is how it is, sort of compensated for having larger number of rod cells. So rhodopsin is the pigment which is useful for giving owls a very powerful vision during night. And the spherical rings around the eyes, they act like our camera rings, for focusing. So that is how owls can focus their eyes by narrowing their eyes or widening their eyes. And another very interesting feature is owls are farsighted. They cannot see this objects very close to them. So unlike vultures, the vultures can see objects very, because they feed on carrots. So they need to see objects very close, the prey which is close to them. Owls, they don't, they see from objects very far, the prey, and these feathers here near the beak, they help them in feeling the objects. So when they are feeding the young ones, or the male or the female come and they exchange the prey, these feathers are give them tactile touch for the owls. This is also another, this is the mottled wood owl. The name is not being seen. I'm sure you all know, you all are birders. So this, you can see this eye shine. Many times when you go out in the night, we see this in carnivore, nocturnal animals, mammals also, when they're out. So when you shine a light source, the light gets reflected. Now what is this? This is because of a layer which is just right behind the retina of the eye, which is called tapetum lucidum. It's like bright tapestry. That is what it means. And this is that it's got a reflector layer. So when the eyes receive this, the tissue receives the light from outside, it reflects it back on the same path. So that is how it gets concentrated, and the bird or the animal can see much better. Though it may be hazy, but the eyes, the rays are concentrated, so they can see better even in the dim light. So owls have equipped themselves wonderfully to become, agile and powerful hunters during the night. Another very interesting thing about owls is their asymmetrical ears. So now you can see here that this is a barn owl, and it has a left ear slightly on an upper position than the right ear. You compare this with our ears. We have our ears on the same level. So when you hear the sound, when we hear as humans, when we hear the sound, we hear it at the same time, and we can sort of guess, okay, it is, that object is this far. But now if you tilt your head and you try, and you tilt your head and try and see if you can hear it in a different type, and that is a difference which you will be able to say, the sound is coming from a particular direction or a particular height or a particular level. So this is the trick which owls use. So they use this to get the location of an object, which is a prey for them, along a vertical and a horizontal plane. So this is the advantage. Even if it's an asymmetrical ear, it is an advantage to the owls. And those, some of the owls, like, the diurnal owls, they do not have asymmetrical ears, but what they have is this concentric rings around their head. So this acts like a funnel. So this acts like a funnel, like a satellite dish, to channel in the sound and give it better depth of understanding with where the object is related. And many times we see the owls making this bobbing, heads upside down. They look very cute, but they are not doing this for some entertainment. They are trying to assess the distance of the prey or the object where the sound is coming from. So this picture here shows, so there is this mouse and the barn owl is there, and you see the arrows, the left and the right. The right arrow goes slightly ahead because it's on the higher plane. The left arrow is here, the left ear is here, and that's how it helps in pinpointing the location of the object. This image of the barn owl. Now, you can see how they swivel their heads left, right, up, down, without any damage to their brain. Or if we were to do this so quickly, this will definitely cause some hemorrhage, or it will cause damage to our blood, brain, and the tissue, the eyes. But owls do this very well, and they are very adapted. So this is a kind of a illustration, a graphic, which shows that owls can do this very quickly. And this is basically why is it, how does it do this? Because it needs to keep an eye on what is going on behind it. And secondly, it's got very wide arteries. So when the arteries are, the blood flow through the arteries do not get blocked, and they get collected in a reservoir kind of a area which the owls have in their skull. So the blood does not get clotted. If we were to do this, this kind of a movement so suddenly, so jerkily, and all the time, it will definitely damage our optic nerves and the brains. So owls have got this right, and they do it all the time. So now let's take a walk in the forest. Okay, so it's like evening time, the moon is out, and it's a pleasant breeze in the evening, and there comes the owl and sits there. Yeah. And now, as the evening goes, let's hear the kind of calls which are coming. So I'm sure you all are birders and you know what is calling. So I'll give out the ID. It is the, yes, you guessed it right. This is a spotted owlet. Yeah. So this is a crepuscular owl. So it calls during early evening and even in the early mornings. So that is the time they're active. Yeah, so this kind of a whistle or a screech. Can you guess what it is? I'm sure you all have heard it. So yes, it is the barn owl, which is the Tyto owl. So they also get active around 7:38 in the evening, and they continuously call through the night. When they're during the breeding season, they'll be feeding the young ones, and this is the call. And a lot of people get very annoyed by this call. So people complain about this all the time, that the barn owls are calling, and they call throughout the night. So this is the, you guessed it. Yeah, so this is the Indian eagle owl. So this owl is also actually crepuscular, and it calls during the evening, even during the breeding season. It may call during the daytime when they are mating. Next. So this very curious call is of, no, I just So what? This call is called what? What? It's very inquisitive call. It is, of course, of the Indian scops owl. You must have seen this owl. This is a nocturnal owl, and occasionally during the daytime or the cloudy days, it will come out and keep inquiring about what happened. So this is, can you guess which species is it? Yes, this is the mottled wood owl, right? So this is the mottled wood owl. This is a blood-curdling call, mottled wood owl. I remember the very first time when I heard it, I sort of lost it. I said, I mean, I wouldn't even guess that it's coming from an owl. And this is a very beautiful, this is a song actually. This is their song during courtship, and male and female both call. As the night progresses, so this you must be familiar with. Yes, this is the Oriental Scops owl, and it's got this. So the Oriental Scops owl has different plumages. It comes in various colors: brown, gray, brown. You know, there it shows for polymorphism. It is different kind of color phases. Next, next. This whistle was of the roundfish owl, and this also is a nocturnal owl, but it's very often it roosts during the daytime, but doesn't call during the day actually, not much. So the night goes through with all the owl calls and melodies, and we can hear all the calls coming through the night, and then the day breaks, and the first call which you will get is the one which is most ubiquitous owl in the forest, and that is the desert. This is the jungle owl. So it's always there, and it's most enthusiastic. Every time you call any other owl, at this owl will come and say, "Okay, I am here. Do you need me?" Kind of. So they are so much. They're quite widespread, and they are very vocal also. This is yeah. And the next call during the daytime. Any takers for this call? Anyone? Yes. So this is the forest owlet. This is the Schedule 1 species, endemic to India, and sorry, and this is an endangered category now. And this is the only species of owl which is endangered in India. So we'll talk about this owl further because I'm working on this species. And so we'll be discussing about this later. Now, talking about owl calls. Now, owls have this unique vocalization. Like, if you think that any other nocturnal birds, do they have this kind of very complex songs? Think of a nightjar. They have very inquisitive metallic calls, but not such long, elaborated calls. Like, I'll play this. Like like a scream or a wailing call of a woman, lady screaming. This is how the owls get this name of banshees. So this is of the spotted eagle owl, and this is seen in the Western Ghats and other in Himalayas. And it's a very interesting, formidable looking species, and the call also says that. And the last call you heard was the mottled wood owl. Now, why do owls have this kind of calls? To us, it sounds eerie, but I'm sure to the mate it does not. It sounds very attractive of the same species because because it indicates physical fitness of the male. It's calling because the complex the song is, the male is more fit and is able to produce better offsprings. And the female will definitely select a male like that. And these calls at night, they have to go reach far in the forest because these are all forest dwelling owls. And but that is why their calls are complex and quite evolved in the sense in complex notes. So, and owls have to secure a mate, go for breeding and pairing, and that is why they have to reach out to their mate. So, there are a lot of theories in why owls vocalize this way at night. So, is it for mate selection? So, this is mainly the reason is mate selections, mate selection, and the diurnal owls. Sorry, so they do not have very complex calls like this because they can see there's a visual signal. And for the nocturnal owl, it is identification through calls or the ears which they stand out, or they have certain like eagle owl, they have a white tuft on their breast which shines during the daytime. So that also sorry, during the night. So that also signals a visual signal for the owl for the mate selection. So the owls are doing everything they can do. They have evolved in such a way that they breed successfully and they can carry on their lineage. This is another very interesting trait, life history trait amongst birds of prey. Now this picture, I'll ask you which is a male and which is a female. So on the left side is actually the female, which is larger. On the right side is the male. So this is called reverse sexual dimorphism. Now, why is this of an advantage to the owls? And this is seen in mostly nocturnal owls. Now, how does it give any advantage to the species? The reason that the research says that if the male is smaller in size, it can go for a smaller prey, and it will be more efficient in catching the smaller prey and delivering it to the female during the breeding season. And that is how the nocturnal owls, the male is smaller and the female is larger. This is also seen in other birds. Another very interesting trait owls have is the ear tufts. So these are the ears, these feathers, which actually are not ears. They're just feathers. They are sign of communication for dominance or submission. So either when an owl is aggressive or it's dominant, the ear tufts will stand up, or when it is in a submissive position, the ear tufts will be flattened. So that shows that it's like in dogs, when you see that ears go down, means that they are in submissive position. So owls have something similar, so that which they use to their advantage, communication between the species, within the species. And some owls, like this jungle owlet or the small owls, they don't have ears. So how do they show their aggression, or how do they show their dominance? They show that by raising their eyebrows or by making their head puffier like this one. So when I saw this bird, I was really wondering why it's looking so unusually big and it's raising its eyes. And then I read up and I realized that this is one of the display of aggression for the owls, or the small owls. And when nothing works, and they just go and hide in their cavity. So if they are approached by a predator, or say even human predator or a diurnal raptor, and even raising of the eyebrows don't work, or if they don't have the tufts, and they quickly go inside the cavity and stay safe in that. So these are some of the adaptations which we talked about, owls, how they have created a very special niche for themselves in the nocturnal night life or night world. So owls of the world now, they have developed and they have evolved in such a way that they would survive. But there are some extinct owls also, like the laughing owl, the reunion owl, the Roderick's little owl, the Mauritian barn owl, the Newton's barn owl. Now, many of them, whatever information I could glean, is because of they had some laughing owl. They said that it could be because of some viral infection, that it died down the population because it was in a small island. And habitat loss has also affected these owls. So we've lost a few of these species already. There are some of these species which are critically endangered, and they are, as I have listed them. This is in pygmy owl, which is in Brazil. Then Anjuna scops owl, Moheli scops owl, they are all towards the African, eastern, near African islands. And these owls are in critically endangered. There are 22 owl species which are near threatened, and 19 species which are vulnerable. So the list is too long, so I did not put it, but this is just representative of what is the status of owls currently. There are 12 endangered owl species, of which spotted owl, burrowing owl, snowy owl, Madagascar red owl, masked owl, and now the forest owlet is also included in the endangered category. So this is the only endangered category of owl in India. Earlier it was considered in the critically endangered, but in 2017, after a couple of new locations were found for the forest owlet, it was upgraded to the endangered category. So now we come to the forest owlet, the endangered species in our country, and we are working on the species in Central India, on ecological study of the forest owlet and other sympatric owls in Central India. There has been a lot of work which has been already done on the forest owlet. So Dr. Rasmussen has already talked about it. Her talk was very illuminating, and she talked about how she discovered. Very interesting. And Rasmussen and BNHS has done a lot of work in the earlier years. So Farah Ishtiaq and Girish Chattar, Dr. Rahmani, they have carried out a lot of work on the species. After that, we have been also working through in Central India. There have been other researchers who have carried out, and I have named all of them here. There is some very interesting molecular and phylogeny work which has been going on by Pankaj Kaparde, Shumita, and Robin. They are working on the phylogeny of the species. Coming back to the study, the study which we are carrying out in Central India. So we are working in Madhya Pradesh, a part of Madhya Pradesh, and in Maharashtra, in Melghat. So the owls is a multi-star, it's like a Bollywood star. There are eight owl species which we are looking at. Of course, in the margin you can see, it's the forest owlet, then you have the jungle owlet, spotted owlet, and the scops owl. So these are all four similar sized owls. They are cavity living owls. And then you have large owls, which is the barn, the mottled-wood owl, eagle owl, and the brownfish owl. So the study which we are looking at is the ecological requirements of the owl assemblage. How these assemblage, they coexist with each other. The forest owlet. So basically the star is of course the forest owlet because this is the endangered species. The rest of them all are in Schedule 4 and they are widely distributed. Why is the forest owlet existing with the same species in the same habitat, feeding from the same source, living next door to each other? Why is the forest owlet having a restricted range and a distribution in the country? And what are the threats faced by these species? And what are the management implications? So this is what we are working on. And this is the study area broadly, which this is the Khandwa division in Madhya Pradesh, where we studied here from 2013 to 17. And in Maharashtra, this is Melghat Tiger Reserve, where we are working currently. So this is the Central Indian landscape where we are comparing the forest owlet and the other owl assemblage in Khandwa division, which is a territorial division, which are reserved forest, which is where there is timber logging is also going on. And just across the border is a protected area of Melghat Tiger Reserve, where there is utmost protection for the owls. And so we wanted to compare the ecological covariates, how it affects the breeding success of all the owl species. So let's talk about the ecological requirements of owls. Here, as I said, the owls, they are regurgitating, they're casting the pellet actually. So I'll talk about this, like we talked about the pH of the stomach. So owls do not have a crop. So when they ingest the prey, it goes straight into the stomach and it gets processed there. And because of the high pH, a lot of bony material does not get digested. So everything right from the dentition to the fur, to the feather, to the skulls and chitinous material, everything is casted out through the mouth. This is called a pellet. Whereas in other birds of prey, this pH is low, so the bones are easily digested. So what comes out is actually the feather and the fur. So that is the difference between owl pellets and the other birds of prey pellets. So here is a collection of pellets. They are different in size and shape, as you can see from brownfish owl to the scops owl. And we collect them and we study them and look at the food composition of each owl species. So pellet analysis is carried out. We weigh each pellet and then we tease apart and we get all the prey remains in our, this is how we separate the prey remains. So as you can see, you can get entire skulls, entire dentition and the hip bones and the femur and tibia, entire bones come out from the owl pellets. And this is the key for identifying which species has been consumed by the owls. And then there are a lot of other things. You have beetle legs and you have heads of the ants and legs of the grasshoppers and bird feathers and reptile dentition and scorpion stings and crab remains, everything which is there. So it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle and you see what all the owl has eaten. This is my favorite picture. This is of the, the pictures of remains of a jewel beetle. So, this jewel in my diet is what I always call it. And it's very beautiful to see, what different types of shiny material which comes out of the owl pellets. And we looked at the diet composition of the forest spotted and jungle owlet. And this is one of the publications. The gray bars are of the forest owlet. The yellow ones show the spotted owlet. And the blue ones represent the jungle owlet. So here we compare the prey composition which is taken by different owls. So as you can see, the forest owlet takes mostly large number of mammals, and then followed by reptiles. Very few birds they've taken. It also depends on the season, and amphibians, and then of course invertebrates are always there. So it's a very Catholic diet. It feeds on whatever is available during the daytime. Now the spotted owlet also takes mammals, but less, and it takes a lot of invertebrates, and it even takes a lot of amphibians, but more than the forest owlet. You see the jungle owlet. The jungle owlet consumes a large number of invertebrates and fewer mammals, smaller mammals. So mammals means rodents and shrews. This is what it means for the owls, smaller mammals. So they have very neatly, partition their prey sizes and prey types among themselves, so that they do not outcompete each other in feeding on the same prey. And this is how maybe that is their mechanism to survive. And that is what we have published in our paper, the Journal of Raptor Research. As you can see, they're feeding on a skink and a rat and a frog. The pictures here show that. And we have, based on our long-term research, we have coming out with a manual for identification of prey remains from owl pellets. So it will be out soon. And here we have worked with Dr. Tharmale, who's from ZSI, the Zoological Survey of India, and he's an authority on identification of mammal remains. And to this, we've also added other taxa, like how to identify mammals. So we have given a broader key. Then how to identify amphibians, reptiles, birds, and invertebrates. So it has a very comprehensive manual for identifying prey remains, and it will be very useful for researchers who are working on diet of, say, carnivores or even birds. We are also working on nest site selection by owls. So as I said, that they all have a specific requirement. So it's like, ecological requirements are like roti, kapda, or makan. So, you need your food, you need your house. So how do these owls all staying together? How they manage to partition resources and yet stay together. So house hunt by different owl species is what we are looking at. You see their owl cavities, the houses are very different. So we are looking at cavity dimension, the tree dimension, the habitat, and it's coming out with very interesting results on what owls want in their houses as their house. So coming to this, we are looking at now how to identify owls, because many of them, they look very similar, between the male and the female. And you cannot really say that, oh, this is the male and this is the same individual that I had seen, on this. You cannot really say that with surety. So color banding is one of the answers to that, where you put color bands on the owls and it has a specific code. So as you can see, so these are all the pictures from outside India. And a lot of work has been going on color banding of owls, which is a very commonly used technique outside India. And these are all endangered species. This is a little owl, burrowing owl, spotted owl, which I already talked about. So they are color banded, And then their studies, they are being studied on how, how far they move, what is the demography, what is the population. So these questions can be answered if you use color bands, a unique ID for each owl. And of course, radio tagging. Now this is the Amur falcon here, and this is the barn owl. The Amur falcon, of course, the study has been done by the Wildlife Institute of India, Dr. Suresh Kumar, a colleague of mine, and he has given amazing results using this, the PTT's transmitters, which everybody knows about, so I won't talk about it. And a lot of work on endangered species is being done using radio tagging, because that gives you very reliable and accurate data on which kind of habitats the birds move. Unfortunately, not much work has been done in India. GIB, their Wildlife Institute is doing, and Dr. Rahmani has been working on that. And so I'll talk about some work which we worked on the color banding in Madhya Pradesh and in Melghat. Of course, this is done with the permission from Ministry of Environment and Forest. So as you can see, this female here, she's color banded, and she was 4-year-old. We had color banded her 4 years ago. This is the same site she's using. This male was banded the same year. So this male came from another site to mate with this female. And so this kind of gives you a lot of information on population pairing, mating, site fidelity of owls. And then you have visual recaptures. So these are all recaptures of owls, forest owlets. In our study area, you can see the color bands here. And they tell you the locality of the individual, even the life, from when it was banded and when it was seen again. So this is the kind of information which you cannot get otherwise. And this is the movement. So this is a juvenile which was this is banded. It has moved here after it was banded. After the next year when it was adult, we banded it and it came from here to here. So they have about 6.5 kilometers it went. Here's some other movement which I have shown, 2.7, 2.5. So owls don't move within their territory, and why they go and look for another territory is another question which we need to understand. Also, we did some radio tagging. 3 birds we had got permission. This is from my Madhya Pradesh data. Can you see this here? Can you see this owl? Can you see the transmitter, the wire here? It's not very clear, but this is a female and we banded her. And these are the locations. So this gives you very interesting locations on where it is feeding, where it is resting. These are all agriculture fields here, farmland, and this is a woody vegetation. A small owl like this, unless you put a radio tag, you are not being able to find out where it is going, where it is feeding. And so here there are some pictures of a very enthusiastic team, who have been working with us in various parts of the country on our owl projects. And we've been working and monitoring these owls when we did tagging, and we've removed the tags, and we got some very interesting information. So this is basically the kind of research which needs to go in to understand what are the factors which are impacting the survival of owl species in wild. And while you're working, there are other pressures. So owls actually have, so I feel, when you think of it, that owls have established themselves as a very successful avian nocturnal predator, right? And if everything was well, it would have really flourished and, gone ahead. But there are certain factors like tree cutting. So when there is tree cutting, it impacts the owls because it is a part of their habitat which is gone for roosting. They are nesting on that species. It's a part of their habitat, and it affects the owls, all owls, very negative. There are some stealing of eggs and hatchlings. So this is again this was done for the parakeet, but this tradition is still continuing in central India or many other places, and this may be impacting all other owls. So far we haven't seen any human predation on forest owlet eggs so far, but it cannot be denied for other owls. Forest fires is very devastating, and it affects right from the prey to the habitat of the owls. In central India, you have huge forest fires. So this is one of the main threats to the owls. Roadkills. This is a picture of a spotted owl, jungle owlet, which was found. So owls do hunt near the roadside, and during the lights, and for the insects, and they get killed by the speeding vehicles, so which is also a huge loss. Use of rodenticides, because owls often feed near the farms, so they the farmers use rodenticide. It is widely used in the country, and as you can see in this picture, we found this dead rodents near one of the forest outlet sites in Madhya Pradesh where we were working. And this is a major issue of concern, because if the owls consume this, they would definitely get impacted. So these are some of the threats which the owls are facing, and their perceptions of owls among humans. So owls are either revered or they are feared. So yeah, so owl is considered as a Vahan of Lakshmi. Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, sits on the owl, and that is why they're considered quite lucky in certain cultures. That if the owl, if you revert to the owl, you get wealth. But also owls are feared and they are mistreated. So I'm using some of this Traffic India's report, which had come out in 2010, which was one of the best reports and very disturbing, which talked about owl trade in graphic details, and it requires a lot of work to get this kind of information and the photographs out, because it's not easy, and the trade is very well spread and widespread in certain parts of the country, and they are exported outside. To get a report like this is very difficult, and I congratulate the authors for that. And these are owls which are used for sorcery, they are used for all kind of medicines, they are used as pets. And even after the Harry Potter movie, there was a lot of demand for having birthday parties, having that owls, caught and given large sum to get these birthday parties done. And owls are always thought as a harbinger of death. It's very interesting that even now, even today, in the cities, people sometimes call me and ask that, there was an owl near my house. Does it mean that there'll be a death in my family? Now, this is very a perception which is very deeply ingrained in a lot of the cultures, even in India and outside. Now, one of the reasons, and I heard that during one of the talks, that when somebody is sick or not well, or if you have a patient in the house, and sometimes during the night, the room lights are on because we are tending to the patient, or looking after the patient. And because of the light, the owls are drawn, and they may be coming and sitting near the ledge of the window because they may be wanting to feed on insects or not. And by any unfortunate incident, if the person passes off, then there's a very strong connection to the owl coming and sitting on my window, and it took the. But actually, there is no logic to it. So one has to really apply science or logic to it, and should really move ourselves away from the superstition and make all kind of efforts to remove these kind of misgivings about owls. And this is another very beautiful poster by Traffic India WWF, where I have taken the liberty of using it. That this is the kind of interesting information that we need, that Kisano, they are into problem, because owls feed on a lot of rodents, and they're actually very useful as a rodent controller. 1,000 rats in a year, farm owls can consume. What more do you want for the farmers? You don't need to spend anything on the rodenticide. So we need to have this kind of awareness programs for the owls. So in our project, through our project, we are doing this encouraging owl purchase. So we talk to the farmers. So this is a very beautiful picture which I have taken from a friend of mine who's working in Atri. And they have been doing this work in Karnataka, Kerala border. And these are owl purchase, and you have to convince the farmers that you put this kind of purchase, attract the owls to your area, and you don't need to really use any rodenticide and pesticides. We are also putting up a lot of public awareness posters about how it's illegal to catch owls, or don't cut trees, or owls are not evil and they will not can be used for black magic. So this kind of awareness and constant information, reliable and scientific information, and engaging with the people is very important. We are also working with training the field staff. So this is I was telling in Madhya Pradesh where I was working, and we know in the territorial area where they're actually trained mainly for tree cutting. So that is where I thought the training was required, to make them aware of what wildlife is there in their area. And they were very excited that they said that this is the first time when we took all these sessions, and they said this is the first time we feel that we are actually forest rangers when we are working for wildlife. And we conducted a couple of workshops. The senior officers from Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra Forest Department, they come and they engage, and they to talk about the work, and we reach this work results to them. And a very interesting incident in Madhya Pradesh where I was working. So the working plan officer, the person who was in charge of the revenue for forest, they came, a very senior officer, and then after hearing about our presentations and how important cavity trees are. They said, you know, this we should put kind of an amendment in the area. Wherever the forest owlets are found, we should really, you know, exempt cavity tree cutting. And in Betul area, we found a new location. Betul is a district in Madhya Pradesh. So that time, the working officer, Mr. Nagar, A.K. Nagar, Anil Kumar Nagar, who was a diploma trainee at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dr. Johnson, you know him. And he, in his working plan, completely exempted that entire area from felling, which is a very commendable achievement. The forest department engaging in taking such proactive steps is wonderful, because they have lost a lot of revenue from that area. These are all prime teak forests. And if the forest department takes this kind of measures, then it is very encouraging, and that is how the research can be used. And similarly, in Melghat also, we have had a very proactive measures by the forest department. They're engaging with the community and discussing about protection of the area. And we are taking, you know, we have established Ullu Hamare Dost workshop, where we actually, you know, talk to people. We hold workshops, street plays, show them films about owl awareness. And this is how we discuss and take our work ahead. Another very major stakeholder for owl conservation is the local communities, where in their farms, the owls are roosting or nesting. And very often these trees are cut. These trees are cut for timber, they are cut for agriculture expansion, and for few hundred or few thousands of rupees. So this is where we need to engage with them. We need to engage with them. So we came up with an idea of community initiative. See, just bailing out money may not really help, because the money may be used in any other ways. So we started training them in owl handicraft. So we realized that all women like to do some kind of a handicraft. So we started training them in stitching owl-shaped bags. And so this took some while, because, you know, there were ladies, you know, you can see they were from a very remote village. They could also not, you know, wear the saris till the head. So they're very shy to approach the tribal communities of Korku communities in Central India. And see the kind of products they are making. They are making forest owlet keychains. So we have a bamboo workshop. So some of the men are trained in making bamboo-shaped, you know, bamboo-shaped articles, which are painted by these people. And we have tote. These are all hand-stitched products and hand-painted products. So we help them. WRCS actually markets these products, and these local communities get money out of this. They earn some income. They earn income through this. And this is a kind of an incentive for them to, you know, we can keep a dialogue about owls on with them. So towards the end now, I'd like to say that what are the implications for species management? So species conservation is a collaborative effort between the forest department, scientists, and conservationists. So we are not three different parties. We are all from the same side of the coin. And we need to have same voice. So it's not one against the other. If we work together, you know, then we can come out with better results. So scientific research actually feeds into management policy, and which helps to design management prescriptions. And the forest department will actually implement this. So this is actually a cohesive work which needs to be done together. Identification and recommendation for mitigation of threats. So through this research, we come to know what are the kind of threats and how one can mitigate it. As I talked about, you know, exempting the trees. So we need to reach out these results to the forest department and discuss the outcomes with them. Distribution of species and protection of important areas for declaration of protected areas is also one of the outcomes of this kind of research. That, you know, these areas are important for the forest owlet. Protection of existing habitat, such as managing tree density, creation of an edge habitat is these are tricky interventions, but it should be done. Critical habitats and niches such as cavity-bearing trees, they're very important resource for cavity-bearing owls, nesting owls like the forest owl, and which needs to be protected. And generating awareness among field staff, local communities, and citizens on owl conservation should just go hand in hand and continuously. Involvement of local community is very important. It's easier said than done, but it is extremely essential, because they are the main stakeholders living in that area, and that involvement has to be done through incentives, through engagement, through discussions. So with this, I'd like to end my talk, and I would like to thank project supporters who have been funding us generously for so many years. That is Raptor Research and Conservation Foundation, Mumbai. So our projects in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra have been funded by them. And we thank them for this. Then Department of Science and Technology, MOEF, Peregrine Fund for supporting the radio tags. We have got excellent support from Forest Department, that is Madhya Pradesh Forest Department, Maharashtra Forest Department, and Melghat Tiger Reserve. So this kind of a unified energy, when you come together, you are definitely going to come out with better results. And I'm very grateful to Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra Forest Department and Melghat Tiger Reserve for understanding the need for this species and coming out with very good prescriptions for this management. And at the end, that I'd like to thank project support Mr. Rishad Navroji and Mr. Kiran Srivastav from RRCF again, Mr. Ravi Singh from WWF General Secretary General, who's been very supportive. PCCF Wildlife of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Field Director of Melghat Tiger Reserve have been very supportive. We have a huge owl project team. A lot of them have worked with us throughout the years. I have mentioned everybody's name. Here, this is the picture of Jayant Kulkarni, who has been our executive director and our guiding force with all the technology. And with him is a very interesting person. This is Mr. Ali Hussain, who has been working with BNHS. And he's a very interesting person who really develops all these techniques for capturing birds and tagging and all. And lots to learn from him, a very energetic person. And then we have collaborators from SECON, Dr. Shumita Mukherjee, Dr. Robin from ICER Tirupati, and Shramakant Talmale from ZSI. And we have very interesting technical advisors in Dr. Rahmani, Bruce Marford, David Johnson, and Janice Rood, and Dr. James Duncan. So we thank them all. And I thank Delhi Bird Foundation and the audience for sticking with me throughout for this long talk and coming out on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Prachi. That was a fabulous talk. For all the viewers, we've now opened up the chat box. So in case you have any questions for Prachi, you can start typing them there, and then I'll ask them to Prachi. Meanwhile, while we have the questions coming in, I can make a few announcements. I hope you can see my screen now. So one of our partners for these Delhi Bird Talks is Zeiss, and they have a competition going on wherein we ask a question of the day after every talk. And the best answer is submitted to Prachi, and she decides who's going to be the winner. And the winner gets to choose between either a Zeiss binocular harness or a Zeiss cleaning kit. So the question for today is, it has two parts to it. The first is, which is the most widespread owl in the world? And the second part of the question is, what are owl ear tufts called? So in order to submit your answers, you need to go to this website, www.delhibirdfoundation.org/contest, and you can submit your answers there. If you'd like, you can take a screenshot of this slide, or just maybe note down this website, and then you can submit your answers over there for this question. The other announcement that we have is to save the date for the Great Indian Nature Quiz, which we are going to be organizing on Sunday, 12th of July at 5 p.m. This is a quiz that's open to all, no prior registrations required. It's going to be held over Zoom, and we're going to have everyone who's attending that session to be able to participate in this quiz. It's going to be really interesting. Bikram Grewal's going to be the quiz master, and he's currently writing questions covering all of Indian wildlife. So please block your dates for that. And for the benefit of those who joined us a little later, our partner for these talks is also Sanctuary Nature Foundation, and they are giving away 1 year's free subscription to their digital copy of Sanctuary Asia magazine or Sanctuary Cub Kids. So in order to avail your free subscription for this digital copy, you can go to, again, Delhi Bird Foundation's website, and there's a link over there. You can just submit your email ID and get your free subscription. Okay, let's see what questions we have here. Okay, so the first question is from Raj Gopal, who's asking, what do you think are the causes for the patchy distribution of the forest owlet?
Yeah, so Raj, this is an interesting and tricky question everybody asks us. Let me tell you honestly, we are still studying. So I cannot really give an answer as of now. But there is certain thing about the habitat selection. So we are looking at that because a couple of modeling has been done, and so we are trying to see if it really follows that pattern. But gives us some more time to come up with this answer.
Okay. Another question from birders. They're asking that many times when they spot an owl, it gets alarmed. Is there a way to approach an owl or locate an owl without disturbing them?
See, the owls are very alert. They would detect any sound which is made by you. So that's how they are very powerful hearer. So the best thing is if you have detected an owl, just keep quiet and if your objective is to study it, then you be there and you make yourself inconspicuous. It will come back that side, and that time you can just observe it. But if you do not go very close to it during the breeding season or they are feeding the young.
Okay. We have a question from JVD Murthy who's asking, competition for nesting cavities must be intense with other cavity nesters. So
Yes.
is this an aspect that you have also studied?
Yes, a very interesting question, sir. So yes, it is. Actually, we are looking at availability of cavities and we are seeing that there are a lot of passerines also, they fight for the cavities with all the owls and diurnal, especially the diurnal cavity holders like the forest owl. So there's parakeet, there's roller, there's mynas, and even the nocturnal ones like the civet and the squirrels, they all fight for the cavity. So that is the reason we are saying that the cavity bearing trees should be retained in the forests. And so whatever it will be of use to all other species.
Okay. Kishan is asking, by looking at the pellet size or the shape, can we make out the owl species without actually seeing the owl? And the second question he's asking is, do owl feed on bats as well?
So the first question, I would say that do not take that chance because it's better to confirm because sometimes if the owl is eaten more, the pellet will be bigger. It's eaten 2-3 rodents at the same time. So I would suggest that, but generally the larger owls have larger pellets and the smaller owls will have smaller pellets. So if you just observe the pellets for some time and see the way the roosting is, it's better to take a decision after observing the species. Just by pellets, it's not very reliable. Second question is about bats. Owls, the larger owls may be feeding on bats. Yes, the eagle owl, that is the boss of all the owls, that can feed on anything, whatever it is. So all the eagle owls can feed on the bats.
Okay. We have a question from Piyush who's asking that when you showed the slide on owls having a soundless flight, so is
Yes.
that a trait that's also shown in some other nocturnal birds such as nightjars?
So yeah, that's what I was saying. The nightjars flight, if you remember, they have the short flapping. They do not travel very far. They'll go and sit on a lamppost. So their flights are not that as silent as an owl's flight. The owl's flight, if it will just whoosh past you. So it's also on a lower hearing range. There may be some sound, but we cannot hear it. So nightjars, I think they do make a sound because they have short flapping.
Okay. Another question on the diet of owls. So the question is that, does the barn owl feed exclusively on rodents or does it feed on anything else as well?
So yeah, barn owls feed a lot on the rodents because they live close to the open areas. So agriculture field, crop fields, grassy areas. So most of their diet is full of rodents, but they also feed some on smaller birds. So we have done the analysis, the diet analysis. So they feed on so they take see they would take anything which is coming their way, but 90% would be rodents. I mean smaller mammals.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have for today.
Oh, good.
So thank you so much, Prachi, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Do join us next week. We have two very interesting talks again. We have Deepu K talking about his pelagic birding experience. And on Sunday, we have Martin Kelsey giving us another fabulous talk on how to identify waders. So Martin gave our first talk, which was for warblers, and now he's doing one for waders. So hopefully see you all next weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.